In just 1 second, the bride's smile vanished, the groom broke down in tears, and the entire ceremony turned into a storm of accusations, fear, and a heartbreaking revelation that would change every life standing in that garden. Before we go on, allow me to wish you peace and good health. Tell me from which country and at what time are you watching this story? The late autumn sun hung low over Ridgway Lake as Maeve Harper finished wiping down the last booth at the diner. Evening light drifted through the tall windows, turning the quiet water outside into a sheet of soft amber. It was the slow, gentle hour of the day, the one Maeve loved most, when the world felt calm enough for a person to breathe. She untied her apron and hung it beside the back door. The place was nearly empty now, just the faint clatter of dishes from the kitchen and the warm hum of the old refrigerator. Behind the counter stood Thomas Hale, the diner's owner, broad-shouldered, steady, the kind of man who'd been part of Ridgway long before the town installed streetlights. "You heading out?" Thomas asked, flipping off a row of lights. "Yeah," Maeve said, slipping into her jacket. "Temperature's dropping fast." Thomas gave a half smile. "Keep your phone on. Folks around town keep mentioning a dark SUV parked where it shouldn't be." Maeve nodded, though she tried not to think too much of it. Ridgway was quiet, in the kind of way that made any small disturbance feel bigger than it was. She stepped outside into the crisp air. Ridgway Lake stretched out before her, smooth, glassy, reflecting the fading sky. She walked toward her car, gravel crunching under her shoes, when she heard a faint rustle near the picnic tables by the shore. She paused. "Hello?" she called softly. At first, there was nothing. Then a small figure rose from behind the bench, a little girl, no more than 6, wrapped in an oversized sweater, clutching a worn stuffed rabbit. Her cheeks were streaked as if she'd been crying for hours. Maeve's breath tightened. "Sweetheart, are you alone?" The child didn't answer. She simply took a hesitant step forward, eyes wide, scared, exhausted. Maeve knelt so she wouldn't tower over her. "My name's Maeve. I won't hurt you. Are you lost?" The girl's voice was barely a whisper, fragile as wind. "Don't let her find me." Maeve's heart turned heavy. "Who, honey?" The girl's gaze slid toward the tree line near the road. Maeve followed it and saw a black SUV parked halfway behind the pines. Engine off, windows dark, watching. A cold ripple moved through her. "Come on," Maeve murmured gently. "Let's get you inside." The child didn't resist. She slipped her small hand into Maeve's fingers, icy, grip trembling. Inside the diner, Thomas looked up sharply. "Maeve, what happened?" "I found her outside," Maeve said quietly. "And someone's watching." Thomas moved toward the front window, lifting the blinds just an inch. "Black SUV?" he asked. Maeve nodded. He exhaled through his nose, slow, concerned. "I've seen it twice this week. Same spot, same time." The little girl stood close to Maeve's leg, shoulders shaking. When Thomas crouched to greet her, she shrank back and whispered something so soft, Maeve barely heard it. "She hurt my mom." Maeve felt the world shift. She knelt again. "What's your name, sweetheart?" The girl hugged her rabbit tighter. "Elara." Maeve placed her hand gently over the child's. "You're safe here, Elara. I'm right here." Outside, the SUV's engine sputtered to life, slow, deliberate, and disappeared down the lakeside road. Maeve and Thomas exchanged a long, troubled look. Whatever this little girl had run from, it wasn't gone, and the night ahead would not be quiet. Thomas locked the diner door while Maeve guided Elara toward a booth near the back, where the lights were softer and the shadows felt less frightening. The girl climbed onto the seat without a word, curling into herself like she wanted to disappear. Maeve grabbed a clean towel and warmed it under the tap before gently dabbing the child's cheeks. "You're all right now," she murmured. "No one's going to hurt you here." Elara didn't answer. She only clutched her stuffed rabbit tighter and watched the door as if expecting someone to burst through it. Maeve glanced toward Thomas, who was now standing beside the window with his phone in hand. "Should we call the sheriff?" she asked quietly. Thomas shook his head. "Not yet. We don't know who's involved, and if that SUV belongs to someone dangerous." He lowered the blinds carefully. "We need to be sure we're helping her, not handing her back to the wrong hands." Maeve knew he was right, even if the thought scared her. She sat across from Elara, keeping her voice low and steady. "Are you hurt, honey?" The little girl shook her head. "Are you cold?" A small nod this time. Maeve slipped her own scarf around Ilara's shoulders. The child touched it gently, almost surprised by the warmth. Minutes passed in the quiet rhythm of the almost empty diner, distant kitchen noises, Thomas pacing slowly near the window, and the soft whisper of the heating vent keeping the chill at bay. Then, in a barely there voice, Ilara whispered, "Where is she?" Maeve leaned in. "Who, sweetheart?" Ilara stared at the glass door. "The woman. She was here." Maeve's hands stilled. "Tonight?" Ilara nodded. Maeve looked at Thomas, who frowned deeply. This wasn't just a frightened child. This was someone who'd been running for a long time. Thomas slid into the booth beside them. "Ilara," he said gently, "did your mom tell you to run? Did she tell you to find someone?" The girl hesitated, then slowly pulled something from her pocket, a tiny, wrinkled scrap of paper. She placed it in Maeve's hand without looking up. Maeve unfolded it. It was an address. Her own. Her breath caught. "You were supposed to find me?" Ilara's lip trembled. Mom said, "Find the lady with the soft voice." Maeve's heart felt like it folded in on itself, an ache, a pull, a responsibility she hadn't asked for but could never turn away from. Thomas leaned in. "Maeve, someone trusted you. Trusted you enough to send this little girl to your door." Maeve closed the paper gently. She didn't know who Ilara's mother was, or why she'd chosen her, but she understood one thing with absolute clarity. Whatever this child managed to escape from, it wasn't finished. A sudden gust of wind rattled the windows. Maeve startled, but the sound faded as quickly as it came. Ilara's small voice broke the silence. "Don't leave me." Maeve reached across the table, steady and warm. "I won't, sweetheart. Not for a minute." Thomas straightened, making a decision. "Maeve, I think you should take her home. At least for tonight. My place is closer to the main road. Your house is tucked in the trees. Quieter." Maeve hesitated. "What if the SUV follows us?" "I'll drive behind you," Thomas said. 2 cars are harder to corner than one. Maeve looked at Ilara, the tiny shoulders, the scared eyes, the child who'd been told to find her of all people. That was enough. She stood and helped the girl put on her small shoes. "All right," she said softly. "Let's go home." The diner lights snapped off one by one as they made their way to the parking lot. The lake sat still as glass, the sky turning a deeper blue. Maeve buckled Ilara gently into the back seat of her old sedan. Thomas's truck idled behind them, headlights warm against the darkness. Ilara whispered, "Will she come?" Maeve met her eyes in the rearview mirror. Not tonight. But even as she said it, Maeve felt something, an instinctive prickle at the back of her neck. The SUV might be gone. The danger wasn't. Tonight was only the beginning. Maeve's old sedan rumbled gently along the winding road that hugged the edge of Ridgeway Lake. The night had settled in fully now, deep, quiet, and heavy in the way small-town nights often are. Pine trees swayed above the narrow road, letting the moon flicker in and out of view like a lantern behind shifting curtains. In the back seat, Ilara sat curled beneath Maeve's scarf, her wide eyes watching the shadows slide across the window. She didn't speak, but Maeve could see the tension in the girl's small shoulders. Every time the headlights caught a tree trunk, Ilara tightened her grip on her stuffed rabbit. Maeve softened her voice. "You doing all right back there, sweetheart?" Ilara didn't answer at first. Then she nodded a tiny motion, like she wasn't sure if it was allowed. "It won't be a long drive," Maeve said gently, "and the house is quiet. You can rest there." Behind them, Thomas's truck followed at a steady distance, its lights a comforting presence in Maeve's mirror. For a moment, the road curved toward a lookout point where the whole lake spread out under the moonlight, still, dark, almost too quiet. And that's when Maeve saw it again. A pair of headlights, far behind them. Too far to make out the vehicle, but close enough for her pulse to jump. She breathed slowly, keeping her voice calm. "Thomas," she said through her headset. "You seeing what I'm seeing?" Thomas's voice crackled through. "Yeah, just stay steady. Could be nothing." Could be. But Maeve knew the rhythm of trouble. Life had taught her that danger rarely announced itself. It crept. It watched. It waited. She turned into the narrow dirt road leading deeper into the woods. Her house sat at the end of it, a small, single-story home tucked among tall pines, far enough from the lake to feel private, but close enough to still smell the water on a windy morning. When they reached the house, Thomas parked his truck sideways near the entrance of the driveway, a silent barrier, just in case. Maeve stepped out and opened the back door for Alara, who slipped her small hand into Maeve's with a trust that felt both fragile and overwhelming. Inside, the house was warm, softly lit by the lamp in the living room. Maeve didn't have much, just old quilts, secondhand furniture, and the gentle comfort of a space lived in by a quiet soul, but tonight it felt like a sanctuary. Maeve guided Alara to the couch. "Sit here, honey. I'll get you some water." The girl nodded, looking around with cautious eyes. She touched the edge of a crocheted blanket draped over the couch, running her fingers along the stitching like she'd forgotten what safe things felt like. Thomas entered through the back door, locking it behind him. He scanned the room not with panic, but with the protective instinct of someone who refused to let trouble slip through unnoticed. "You want me to stay for a bit?" he asked quietly. Maeve brought over a glass of water, watching Alara sip it slowly, maybe just until she falls asleep. Thomas nodded and took a seat near the window. The woods outside were still, but every now and then a branch snapped somewhere in the distance, a reminder that the night was never truly silent. Maeve sat beside Alara, gently brushing hair from the girl's face. "Honey, do you know why your mom wanted you to find me?" Alara's eyes glistened. She leaned closer, voice barely a breath. She said, "You help people." Maeve swallowed. Did she say anything else? Alara's small fingers tightened around her rabbit. "She said, if anything happens to me, go to the lady with the soft voice." Maeve felt something warm and painful gather behind her ribs. She didn't know Alara's mother, not by name, not by face, but somehow their lives had brushed close enough for a dying woman to trust her. Thomas watched quietly from the window. "Maeve, someone chose you on purpose. That means something." Maeve nodded, though her heart trembled under the weight of it. She turned back to Alara, speaking gently. "Honey, this woman you're afraid of, is she the same woman from the SUV?" Alara's body went rigid. She nodded slowly. "And she hurt your mother?" Alara squeezed her rabbit so tightly it seemed strained. Her voice cracked like thin ice. "Yes." Maeve reached for her hand, warm and steady. "You don't have to say more tonight. You're safe here, I promise." "Oh." But even as she spoke, Thomas lifted a hand, a silent gesture for Maeve to look toward the window. She did. Her heart stilled. Far down the dirt road, a pair of headlights appeared. Slow, crawling, searching. And Maeve knew this night was far from over. Thomas stayed at the window, barely breathing, watching the pair of headlights inch their way along the distant road. They didn't rush. They didn't flash. They moved with the slow certainty of someone who knew exactly where they were going and who they were looking for. Maeve felt Alara press against her side. The girl's fingers trembled, but she didn't make a sound. "It's okay," Maeve whispered, keeping her voice steady, though her own heartbeat had quickened. "You're safe here." Thomas spoke without turning from the window. "That car's not coming fast. They're scouting, trying to see if anyone's awake." He paused. "I'll step outside, just to get a better look." Maeve shook her head gently. "No, if it's her, we don't want to spook her. Not yet." Alara tugged on Maeve's sleeve with a whisper so thin it almost vanished. "She likes the dark." Maeve closed her eyes for a moment. The child wasn't describing fear. She was describing experience. Thomas stepped back from the window. "We should call Callum." Maeve looked up sharply. "We don't even know if he's part of this." "He's the girl's father," Thomas said softly. "He deserves the chance to know she's safe." Alara flinched at the word father. Maeve placed a gentle hand on her back. "Honey, does your dad know where you are?" "No," Alara whispered. She didn't let him. Maeve and Thomas exchanged a quiet, heavy look. Something unspoken passed between them. An agreement that they were standing in the middle of a story deeper and darker than they realized. Thomas lowered his voice. "Maeve, let me make the call. Carefully. I'll keep it vague, just to test the waters." Maeve hesitated, then nodded. While Thomas stepped into the hallway to make the call, Maeve sat with Alara on the couch, letting the girl lean against her side. The house creaked as the wind changed direction, brushing against the windows like a long, slow exhale. After several minutes, Thomas returned, his face uneasy. "Callum didn't answer," he said. "But—" He held up his phone. "He texted. Said he's been working late, but he'll call back soon." Maeve frowned. That doesn't sound like him. It doesn't, Thomas agreed. Before Maeve could respond, a soft crunch of gravel broke the silence. The headlights had turned onto Maeve's driveway. Ilara pulled her knees to her chest, eyes wide. Maeve rose from the couch slowly, keeping her body between the child and the door. Thomas moved closer to the window, but this time he didn't lift the blinds. He simply listened. The car engine idled low, steady, too patient. Then, it cut off. Silence thickened around the house. Even the wind seemed to stop. After several heartbeats, someone stepped out of the vehicle. The sound of boots on gravel echoed softly. One step, then another. Slow, purposeful. A shiver crawled up Maeve's spine. The footsteps came closer and closer until they reached the front porch. The boards creaked under the weight. Maeve held her breath. A gentle cop came next. Not forceful, not angry. A soft, deliberate tap, tap, tap. As though the visitor wanted to sound polite. Thomas whispered, "Who knocks like that at this hour?" Maeve didn't answer. She stepped forward, just close enough to see the outline of a figure through the frosted glass. Tall, still, watching. The figure lifted a hand and tapped again, same soft rhythm. Maeve swallowed. "Ilara," she whispered, "stay behind the couch. Don't move." The girl obeyed instantly. Thomas reached for Maeve's arm. "Don't open it." I won't," she said, "but I need to know who it is." The figure outside shifted slightly, placing something small on the porch before stepping back into the shadows. Then came a low voice, calm, almost pleasant. "Maeve Harper, I know you're home." Maeve's heart froze. Thomas stiffened. Ilara whimpered softly behind the couch. The voice continued, still polite, still wrong. "We should talk." Maeve stepped backward, pulse hammering. Whoever was outside knew her name, knew her home, knew she had the child. And that made one thing painfully clear. This wasn't a chance encounter. It was the beginning of something she wasn't ready for, and yet had no choice but to face. The porch fell silent after the voice faded, leaving only the faint rustle of pine needles brushing against the house. Maeve stood frozen a moment, trying to steady the tremor in her breath. She wasn't the kind of woman who scared easily, but there was something deeply wrong about the calm tone outside, something too familiar with her name, too certain of her presence. Thomas moved closer. "Maeve, step back from the door." She did, but slowly, keeping her eyes on the blurred silhouette standing just beyond the frosted glass. The figure didn't knock again, didn't call out, simply waited, like someone confident that waiting wouldn't change the outcome. Maeve swallowed hard. "Ilara," she whispered gently. "Stay where you are, honey." The little girl's small head peeked from behind the couch, her eyes huge. "She found us," she whispered, voice shaking. Maeve knelt beside her. "You're safe, I promise. I won't open that door." Thomas glanced at the hallway. "I'm calling the sheriff." Maeve grabbed his sleeve before he could go. "Not yet. If it's her, we don't want to spook her. She might run before they get here." Thomas frowned. "Maeve, that woman is standing on your porch." "I know," she said softly. "But let's see what she tries to do first." The voice outside called again, polite, measured. "Maeve Harper, I don't want any trouble, I just need the girl." Ilara whimpered and curled tighter behind the couch. Maeve felt heat rise in her chest. "She's not going anywhere," she said under her breath. The figure shifted, and a small object slid beneath the door thin enough to pass through the small gap, landing near the mat. Maeve stared at it for a moment, before reaching carefully to pick it up. A photograph. A woman's hand holding a little girl's wrist too tightly. The girl's face, Ilara's face, was turned away, head bowed, as if bracing for something. Maeve felt her fingers tighten around the picture. Thomas's jaw clenched.
"She's trying to scare you."
"No," Maeve whispered. "She's trying to show she's in control." The figure outside took a single step back, boots scraping lightly on the porch. "I'll return in the morning," the voice said calmly. "Don't make things harder than they have to be." Then silence again. A moment later, the car door opened. The engine started soft, low, and faded slowly down the long dirt road until only the stillness of the woods remained. Thomas locked the deadbolt, then locked it again. "She knows your name, Maeve, your house, everything." Maeve set the photograph face down. This woman didn't end up here by accident. Ilara crawled into Maeve's arms, small fingers shaking as they clung to her sweater. Maeve held her close, rocking gently slow, steady motions that matched the way older folks often comforted each other when words felt too fragile. "It's okay, sweetheart," she murmured. "She's gone." But Ilara pressed her face into Maeve's shoulder. "She always comes back." Maeve looked at Thomas. "We need help. And Callum," Thomas said. "We need to reach him before she does." Maeve nodded. "Yes, but we also need someplace safer. My house is too exposed." Thomas's eyes met hers. "The lake house?" "No." Maeve shook her head. "She saw me there earlier. She'll check it." Thomas thought for a long moment, then said quietly, "My family's cabin, up the ridge, old place. Hard to find unless you know where to look. No direct road, just a narrow trail along the trees." Maeve breathed out slowly. "That might work." Ilara lifted her head. "Is it far?" "Not far," Maeve said softly, "but quiet." Thomas grabbed his jacket. "We go before sunrise." She said she'd be back in the morning. Maeve tucked a blanket around Ilara. "We'll rest a bit first." Tom gave Maeve a worried look. "You think she'll actually wait until morning?" "No," Maeve said quietly. "People like her don't keep promises." Hours later, when the house had gone still and Ilara finally slept on the couch, Maeve sat at the kitchen table with Thomas, her hands wrapped around a warm mug she hadn't touched. "You think Callum's really working late?" Thomas asked. Maeve shook her head slowly. "No. Something's wrong. And he's either too scared to answer, or he can't." Thomas leaned forward. "Maeve, we're in deeper than we thought." She nodded, eyes soft, voice steady. "But we protect the child first. Then the truth." A floorboard creaked near the front window. Thomas and Maeve both turned sharply. Nothing moved. But outside, the woods didn't feel empty anymore. Maeve whispered, "She's circling." Thomas's voice dropped low. "We leave before dawn." Maeve looked toward the sleeping child, curled beneath the quilt. "Yes," she said softly, "before she gets even a step closer." Dawn was still a long way off, but the house had grown restless. The wind pressed against the siding in long, uneven breaths. A loose branch tapped lightly against the gutter with a steady, unsettling rhythm. Shadows stretched across the hardwood floor in thin lines that moved each time the porch light flickered. Maeve sat awake on the edge of the couch, watching Ilara sleep. The little girl's breaths were shallow but steady, her small fingers clutching Maeve's scarf as if she feared it might disappear in the night. Maeve brushed a strand of hair from the child's forehead, her thoughts heavy, her heart heavier. She had been trusted with something, a child, a secret, a responsibility she hadn't asked for but could never walk away from. And the danger outside wasn't the kind that lost interest easily. Thomas returned from checking the back door. "All locked, windows secure." He lowered his voice. "No car sounds for the last hour. Nothing moving out there." Maeve nodded, though her shoulders stayed tight. "She's not gone. She's waiting." Thomas took a slow breath. "We need to move soon, before the sky turns." Maeve looked at the clock. 30 minutes, maybe 40. Thomas studied her face. "You haven't slept." "I couldn't," Maeve said softly. "Not with her out there." He didn't argue. Instead, he sat down across from her, quiet, steady, present. The kind of presence that didn't need words to offer comfort. After a moment, Maeve whispered, "Thomas, do you think Ilara's mother is still alive?" Thomas paused. "I don't know, but I think she tried everything she could to get her daughter to safety. That tells me she cared. And people who care don't give up easily." Maeve looked toward the window, where the faintest pale glow hinted that night was beginning its slow retreat. If she's alive, she's fighting alone. "And now she's not," Thomas said. Before Maeve could respond, a soft vibration buzzed against the table. Thomas's phone. Maeve's breath caught. "Callum?" He checked the screen. "Yes, He answered immediately, voice terse. "Callum? It's Thomas. Where are you?" Static. A faint crackle. Then a strained voice. "Thomas?" Maeve leaned closer. Thomas lowered the phone, turning on speaker. "We've got Alara. She's safe." The line went quiet. Then Callum exhaled a sound that was half relief, half disbelief. "Thank God. Where is she? Please, please, tell me she's all right." Maeve spoke gently. "She's here with me, Callum. She's scared, but safe." And there was another silence, heavier this time. Then Callum's voice returned tight, shaky, near breaking. "Maeve, she's coming for you." Maeve froze. "Who is she?" "She used to work with my wife," Callum said. "After the accident, she became obsessed. Blamed us for things we didn't do. She kept finding ways to get close. Then," he swallowed hard, "then she took Alara." Thomas exchanged a grim look with Maeve. "Callum," Maeve said quietly, "you need to get somewhere safe." "I can't," he whispered. "She took my phone earlier. I just got it back. I don't have my truck. I'm on foot in the woods trying to reach the sheriff's office before she—" The line crackled sharply. "Callum," Thomas said. "Callum!" A faint gasp came through, like the phone had been dropped. Then a new sound filtered across the speaker. Low, deliberate, the steady crunch of footsteps on leaves. Maeve went rigid. Callum's voice rose, panicked. "She's here." The call cut out. Maeve pressed a hand to her mouth, fighting the rush of fear. Thomas stood, jaw tight. "We need to go. Now." Maeve moved quickly, gathering blankets and Alara's rabbit. She lifted the sleeping child, who stirred drowsily. "Where?" Ilara whispered. Maeve kissed the top of her head. "Somewhere safe, sweetheart. We're taking you to a quiet place." Thomas cracked the front door open, scanning the dark ridge road beyond. No headlights, no figures, no movement. "Clear," he whispered, "for now." They stepped into the cold air, Maeve holding Alara close. Thomas walking slightly ahead, watchful. The woods around them were still. Too still. As Maeve locked the door behind her, she felt a prickle run up her spine. The kind of instinct older folks trusted more than reason. She didn't see anything, didn't hear anything. But she felt it. They weren't alone. Not anymore. And whatever waited beyond the tree line was done with knocking. The woods were darker than Maeve expected, thick with early night mist drifting low between the pines. Thomas kept his truck hidden behind a fallen log off the service road, its engine finally cooling to silence. The black SUV that had been following them earlier rolled past on the pavement below, headlights scanning gently, but it didn't see the turn they had made. "They'll keep circling the paved road," Thomas whispered. "They can't drive up this trail. Too narrow, too rocky." "Oh," Maeve nodded, clutching Alara closer. "So, they're still out there, but not close. Not yet." The child's small hands were cold against Maeve's collarbone. 6 years old, exhausted, overwhelmed, she didn't say a word. She only kept her head buried against Maeve's shoulder, as though hiding from the world might make it stop. Thomas dimmed the flashlight with his fingers. Cabin's about 15 minutes uphill. Slow steps, no noise. Maeve breathed deeply and followed him. The woods weren't loud, but they weren't silent either. Twigs snapping under their feet, branches whispering overhead, a faint rustle of night creatures settling into their nests. Every so often, the distant hum of the SUV engine drifted through the trees before fading again, always farther away. "They're looking for the truck," Thomas murmured. "They don't think we'd walk off-road with a child." Maeve tightened her hold. "Good. Let's not give them reason to." They continued uphill until the trees thinned enough to reveal a weathered cabin tucked between two ancient pines. It looked old, abandoned even, but solid. The kind of place no one bothered to look at twice. Thomas unlocked the door with an old brass key. "My grandfather's. Haven't been here in years." Inside smelled of cedar, dust, and the faint echo of a place once lived in. Thomas lit a battery lantern, filling the room with warm amber light. Maeve laid Alara gently on the small cot and covered her with a quilt. The child curled instinctively, clutching Maeve's sleeve before letting go. Maeve brushed a strand of hair from her forehead. "She's trembling." "She's had a day no child should have," Thomas said quietly. He checked each window locks intact, no footprints near the glass. When he reached the back door, he paused. "Fresh mud here. Human, maybe a day old. Someone's been around the cabin recently, but not tonight." And Maeve's stomach tightened. "Callum," Thomas nodded slowly. "Could be. He knows these woods better than most." Maeve sat beside Ilara, listening to her small breaths. The child stirred and whispered, "Is Daddy here?" "Not yet, sweetheart," Maeve said softly. "But we'll find him." Ilara's eyes drifted open, halfway glassy, unfocused. He said not to follow the lights in the trees." Maeve froze. "What lights?" Ilara swallowed. "The kind that blink once. She uses those to trick people." Maeve exchanged a worried glance with Thomas. "She's been watching them longer than we thought." Thomas lowered his voice. "Let's let her rest. At sunrise, we go look for Callum. If he's hurt, he'll head downhill." Maeve nodded, though a knot remained tight in her chest. She stood, warming her hands near the small stove Thomas had lit. The soft orange glow pushed back the chill. The cabin now felt less like an abandoned hideout and more like a place that could hold hope, if only for a few hours. Outside, something snapped softly in the undergrowth. Not loud, not close, but intentional. Thomas's posture shifted. Maeve held her breath. Then silence again. Wind moved lightly through the pines, brushing past the cabin walls, like a reminder that the woods were still awake. Thomas whispered, "They're not here yet. They're still on the road. Probably frustrated they can't track us." Maeve exhaled slowly. "Then we use the night." Thomas nodded. "Rest in shifts. I'll take first watch." Maeve returned to Ilara's side, smoothing the quilt. The child whispered, barely awake, "Don't let the humming woman in." Maeve's heart tightened. "No one is coming in," she said gently. "Not while we're here." Ilara breathed out, trusting Maeve's voice more than the room around her. The lantern flickered softly, and in the distance, far enough not to frighten, close enough to warn, the faint hum of an engine drifted up the ridge road. The SUV hadn't given up, but it hadn't found them either. At least, not tonight. Morning light crept gently into the cabin, casting soft gold across the wooden floorboards. Maeve's eyelids fluttered open. For one peaceful moment, she forgot where they were. Then she felt the weight of a small hand curled against her arm. Ilara, still sleeping, cheeks rosy from the warmth of the quilt. Thomas was sitting near the stove, boots on, shoulders slightly bent forward. He had kept watch through the night, listening to every sound the woods dared to make. "How long was I asleep?" Maeve whispered. "A couple hours," he murmured. "You needed it." Maeve sat up carefully, not waking Ilara. Thomas nodded toward the window. "The SUV circled the lower road twice around dawn, but never came up the ridge. They still think we're in the truck." Maeve let out a quiet breath. Good. But her relief lasted only seconds, because the forest answered back with something faint but unmistakable. A distant, pained shout. Maeve and Thomas locked eyes instantly. "Callum," she breathed. Thomas grabbed the lantern and stepped outside just far enough to listen again. The sound didn't repeat, but the woods held a tense hush. "Direction?" Maeve asked. "East slope," Thomas replied. "Not far. Maybe he slipped or twisted something trying to get through the brush." Maeve already had her coat on. "We have to go." Ilara stirred, blinking sleepily. "Is Daddy here?" Maeve brushed her hair gently. "We think he's close. We're going to find him." The child jolted upright, frightened. He said not to follow the lights in the trees." Maeve knelt. "I heard you last night, but there are no lights now. Just morning, just us." Ilara swallowed hard, but nodded. Thomas led the way as they moved through the thinning morning mist. The forest floor was damp, making their steps soft. Birds were only beginning to stir. After 10 minutes of weaving through brush, they found him. Callum sat against a fallen log, one hand bracing his ankle, breath short but steady. His phone lay beside him in the dirt. Maeve rushed over. "Callum, what happened?" "I tried calling again," he murmured, lifting the phone. "Signal flickered for a moment, but the battery died. I shouldn't have run last night. I tripped in the dark, twisted my ankle pretty bad." Maeve checked the swelling. "It's not broken, but you won't be walking fast." Callum managed a faint smile for Ilara. "Hey, Starshine." Ilara hesitated before stepping close, then wrapped her arms around him, face pressed against his shoulder. Callum's voice cracked. "I'm here. I'm okay." Thomas crouched beside him. "Did you see her?" Callum shook his head slowly. "Just heard her humming. Somewhere behind me. I panicked, went off the trail." Maeve looked sharply at Thomas. So the humming wasn't a child's imagination after all. Callum wiped his forehead. I was trying to get to you, but I didn't want to lead her straight to the cabin. That was smart, Thomas said quietly. And we're glad she didn't find you. They helped Callum stand. His ankle couldn't bear full weight, so Thomas took most of it over his shoulder. The walk back was slow, careful, but the forest felt lighter now, less like a trap and more like the path home. Maeve glanced at Callum. You said she took your phone once before? Callum nodded. Weeks ago. I found it tossed in the woods yesterday while looking for Alara. Battery was half dead, but enough to try. She's been toying with me. Maeve felt Alara flinch and gently held her close. When the cabin finally appeared between the trees, Callum seemed relieved just to see a roof, any roof. Inside, Maeve helped him to the cot, and Thomas checked the ankle again. She's not far, Callum said quietly. Her trail was fresh last night. She's searching for something more than just us. Maeve looked at him. You mean the papers? Callum nodded. They're hidden in my house, Maeve. And sooner or later, she'll think to search again, if she hasn't already. A slow, heavy stillness filled the cabin. Maeve swallowed. Then after you rest, we go home. Callum nodded. It's the only way. Alara squeezed his hand, voice tremoring. Daddy, we'll be okay, right? Callum looked at her gently, brushing a thumb across her cheek. We will be. Because we're together. Outside, the forest finally exhaled, as though giving them this one moment of calm before whatever waited next. The forest road leading to the cabin curved gently along the quiet edge of Ridgeway Lake, where the water lay still and gray beneath the winter light. Maeve kept her windows slightly open, letting the crisp air steady her nerves. Callum drove with one hand on the wheel, the other resting close to Alara's knee in the back seat, as if the small gesture could anchor both of them. They had left town early, hoping to spend just a few quiet hours at the cabin, a place Callum said once belonged to his father, who used it to escape the noise of life. Today, it was meant to be a refuge. Maeve believed that too, or at least she wanted to. But the sense of being watched had followed them from Ridgeway. It wasn't dramatic or loud. It was quiet, too quiet. A car slowing near the house the night before. A shape Maeve wasn't sure she saw moving at the corner of the yard. A porch light flickering, though no wind touched it. Little things. Nothing a police report could hold. But enough for a woman like Maeve, who had learned to trust the tug in her chest when something felt off. Alara hummed softly behind them, tracing fog circles on the window. Daddy, will the cabin smell like Grandpa? Callum smiled faintly. Probably. That old cedar never really leaves. Maeve glanced at him. He was tired, more than tired. The kind of tired people carried after months of holding the world together with trembling hands. You sure it's okay bringing her out here? Maeve asked gently. She didn't want her words to sound like fear, though she was afraid. Callum nodded. It's safer than being at home right now. And she likes the cabin. Grace used to bring her here when she was little. Maeve's heart softened at the name Grace spoken with that quiet ache that always lived behind Callum's voice. Grief had a sound, she'd learned. Soft, heavy, familiar. They reached the cabin as the wind picked up, whispering through the tall pines. The place stood small but sturdy at the clearing's edge. Its windows shone with the last of the morning light. Maeve carried the picnic basket while Callum lifted Alara, who was still half asleep from the ride. Inside, the cabin smelled of cedar and old blankets. Dust clung to the corners. But the place felt lived in, warm, shaped by memories that lingered long after the people had gone. Alara curled on the couch, pulling her stuffed rabbit close. Maeve spread a blanket over her, brushing a stray curl from the girl's forehead. For a little while, the cabin was peaceful, but only for a little while. Callum stepped outside to bring in more firewood. Maeve followed him to the porch. What's really going on? She asked softly. You said someone's been around the house. I didn't want to scare you, he said, staring at the lake. But yes, someone's been watching. Who? I don't know, but they know our routines. They move quietly. They look inside the windows when they think we're asleep. Maeve's breath caught. Callum. He leaned against the railing, voice breaking slightly. Grace used to have a friend, Evelyn Hartman, lived 2 houses down. They grew up together. After the accident, Evelyn? He hesitated. She didn't handle it well. She disappeared from town for a while, and now she's back. Maeve felt the shift like a cold wind. Do you think it's her? Callum didn't answer at first. He stared over the lake, his face pale. "She left a drawing on our porch last week," he finally whispered. A drawing only Grace would know. A lullaby Grace used to sing, written phonetically, like Evelyn heard it wrong. Maeve shivered. "That's not a good sign." "No," he said. "It isn't. The silence stretched until Maeve finally asked, "Callum, what do you think she wants?" He turned toward her, eyes full of the fear he'd been trying to hide for weeks. "I think she believes she's supposed to take care of Alara now." Maeve's breath left her body. She gripped the railing, grounding herself. "Because of Grace?" He nodded. "And because someone at the hospital said something to her. Something that made her believe she had the right, or the duty." "Oh, and she believes it," Maeve whispered. "She truly does." Maeve steadied her voice. "Then we have to protect Alara, and we have to do it smart." Before Callum could answer, the sound of something soft like a twig snapping echoed faintly from the tree line. Both of them turned at once. Maeve stepped down from the porch, scanning the shadows between the trees. Nothing moved, nothing showed. But the cabin no longer felt like a refuge. Callum stepped beside her. "Let's go back inside." Maeve nodded. Inside the cabin, Alara slept peacefully. The fire crackled softly. Everything looked gentle, safe. But Maeve knew better. Someone out there had followed Grace's memories into the woods. And they weren't done. The afternoon light dimmed faster than Maeve expected, slipping behind a stretch of clouds that crept across the sky like a slow-moving tide. She sat beside the cabin window, watching the tree line with steady eyes. Nothing stirred, yet the stillness felt tightened, as though something out there held its breath along with them. Callum returned to the living room, with a few logs stacked in his arms. He knelt beside the fireplace and fed the flames, creating a soft glow that warmed the room. Alara curled deeper beneath her blanket on the couch, comforted by the crackling wood. Maeve could see the girl was trying to be brave, but fear has a way of finding the edges of even the strongest children. Callum sank onto the chair across from Maeve. "I keep thinking," he murmured, "if Grace were here, she'd know what to do." Maeve shook her head gently. "Grace trusted you, Callum. That has to mean something." He looked down, running a hand across his face. "I just don't understand why Evelyn is doing this. Why now?" Maeve leaned forward, voice soft, steady. "Grief changes people. Some cling to memories, some rewrite them, and some—" She hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "Some get lost in them. Maybe Evelyn felt closer to Grace than anyone realized." Callum stared into the fire, shadows flickering across his features. "After the accident, Evelyn showed up at the hospital before I even had time to think. She cried harder than anyone. She kept asking nurses questions, hovering near every doorway. One nurse asked her if she was family, and when she hesitated, I heard the nurse say, 'Are you the mother?'" Maeve's breath tightened. "And Evelyn didn't correct her," Callum continued. "I thought she was in shock. I didn't think it meant anything." "It meant everything," Maeve whispered. He nodded slowly. "Now I see it." Outside, the wind brushed the cabin walls like fingers searching for a crack. Maeve stood, gently pulling the curtain aside. The woods had grown darker, branches swaying like silhouettes, reaching toward the clearing. She closed the curtain before Alara could wake and see. Callum rose, limping slightly from an old injury he never quite talked about. He stepped toward the door and checked the lock. "We'll stay until sunset. Then we head back. I don't want her thinking we're hiding." Maeve nodded. "You don't have to face this alone." He offered her a faint, tired smile. "I know. That's the part that scares me a little less." A quiet hour passed as they rested in the soft glow of the fire. Maeve helped Alara prepare a small snack, telling her stories about Ridgway's autumn fairs and the little bakery near the lake that always oversalted its pretzels. The girl laughed once, a small sound, but enough to ease the heaviness in the room. Just as Maeve returned to her seat, a faint rattle sounded near the porch. Not loud, not forceful, as though someone brushed against the railing accidentally or intentionally. Callum stiffened. Maeve raised a hand, signaling him to stay back. She moved quietly to the window, lifted the curtain just an inch, and peered outside. A figure stood at the edge of the clearing. A woman, still as a tree trunk, her coat pale against the dusk. her hair loose, swept by the wind. Maeve didn't need to see her face to know who it was. Evelyn Hartman. She wasn't moving toward the cabin. She wasn't calling out. She wasn't threatening anything. She was simply watching. Like someone checking on a child she believed she had every right to see. Maeve dropped the curtain softly and turned toward Callum, her expression composed but grave. "She's here." His throat tightened. "Where?" "By the clearing. She's not approaching. She's observing." Callum closed his eyes for a moment, then exhaled shakily. "This isn't anger. This is obsession." Maeve knelt next to him. "Callum, if she believes she's part of Alara's life, she won't stop with watching. She'll keep circling your home, your routine, your spaces." He nodded. "We need to leave. Now." Maeve woke Ilara gently. The girl blinked sleepily, clutching her blanket. Thomas, who had been quiet through the afternoon, scanned the porch through the side window and gave a small nod confirming Evelyn hadn't moved. They left the cabin with deliberate calm. Callum held Ilara close. Maeve walked beside them, every sense sharp. Once inside the car, Callum started the engine. Maeve glanced toward the clearing one last time. Evelyn was still there, standing perfectly still. Not chasing, not hiding, just watching them leave. As the car rolled down the forest road, Maeve whispered, "She's not done." Callum nodded, eyes fixed ahead. "No, but neither are we." Ridgeway Lake shimmered faintly through the trees as dusk spread across the landscape, and Maeve felt the shift a moment when something dangerous stops being hidden and becomes real. And reality, she knew, demanded courage. The drive back from the cabin took longer than usual, though the roads were empty, and the lake lay quiet beneath the deepening dusk. Sometimes fear stretches minutes into miles, and tonight that quiet dread traveled with them like an unseen passenger. Maeve kept her eyes on the rearview mirror more than she cared to admit, half expecting to see a pale car or a shadowed figure trailing behind, but the road stayed empty. Empty in the kind of way that didn't comfort, only unsettled. Ilara rested her head on Maeve's shoulder, too tired to understand the tension filling the car. Maeve held her gently, smoothing her hair while listening to the tired rhythm of Callum's breath. His hands gripped the steering wheel a little too hard, knuckles pale in the fading light. The town's first street lamp flickered on as they reached Ridgeway's main road. The familiar storefronts Miller's Hardware, the little barber shop with its squeaking sign, the diner with the red neon coffee cup should have felt like safety. But even here, Maeve sensed an offness in the air, as if the quiet community she'd always known was holding its breath, too. When they pulled into Callum's driveway, the house looked unchanged at first glance. Same porch, same curtains, same faint glow from the lamp he always left on for neighbors passing by. But Maeve felt it the moment her foot touched the ground. A stillness, heavy, unnatural, as if someone had been standing there minutes before they arrived. Callum noticed it too. He froze beside the car door, scanning the yard with careful eyes. "Stay close," he murmured. Maeve lifted Ilara in her arms, and Thomas walked ahead, keeping his steps steady but vigilant. He flicked on the porch light. It buzzed softly, casting a warm circle across the welcome mat. They entered the house. At first, nothing looked disturbed, but the deeper Maeve walked in, the more she noticed the subtle signs. A chair pulled a few inches away from the table. A hallway light left on, though Callum always turned it off. Ilara's drawing taped to the fridge but placed slightly off-center. "Tu deliberate." Too careful. Callum exhaled shakily. "She's been inside." Thomas checked the lock again. "She didn't force it. Must have had a duplicate or picked it. Quiet. Precise." Maeve swallowed. "She came searching, just like at the cabin." Callum leaned against the wall, his voice low. "She thinks she's doing something right. That terrifies me more than if she meant harm." Maeve's gaze drifted toward the staircase. "There's one place she would look. The one place connected to Grace." Callum followed her eyes. "The attic." Ilara tugged Maeve's sweater. "Is she inside the house now?" Maeve knelt to meet the girl's eyes. "No, sweetheart. She's not here. But she came because she's confused. That's all." Ilara hesitated, then whispered, "She looks sad, Maeve, in the forest." Maeve's chest tightened. Children see emotions adults overlook. "Yes," Maeve said softly. "She's very sad. And sadness can make people forget what's real." Callum rubbed a hand along the back of his neck. I don't want Ilara afraid in her own home. Maeve stood slowly. Then let's make sure there are no surprises left. They reached the stairs. Maeve led the way, every step creaking softly under their feet. Thomas followed behind, hands half raised, as though ready to steady whatever might come. Callum stayed close to Ilara, murmuring reassurance. Halfway up, Maeve paused. A cold draft brushed her arm, but no window was open. The hallway seemed normal, the family photos in their frames, the faint scent of lavender from the laundry room, but the air held a weight that didn't belong. Maeve whispered, "She went upstairs." Callum nodded. Grace and Evelyn used to spend hours up here talking, painting, writing letters. The attic was their favorite place. The memory made the floorboards feel heavier beneath them. They reached the narrow hallway at the top. The attic hatch hung above, its pull string swaying gently, though there was no breeze. Maeve stepped beneath it and let her breath settle. "She wanted us to know she came," she murmured. Thomas narrowed his eyes. "This isn't random. It's a message." Maeve looked back at Callum. "Are you ready?" He held Ilara close for a moment longer, then placed a hand over her hair.
Let's find out what she was looking for.
Maeve took the pull string in her hand. The house fell silent, so silent she could hear the faint shift of wood deep in the walls, the soft whisper of the heater, the heartbeat in her own ears. She pulled gently. The hatch opened with a long, slow creak, and the truth waiting above them felt closer than ever. The attic ladder unfolded with a soft groan, settling into place like an old memory being called back into daylight. Maeve steadied it with one hand, testing each rung before stepping up. The air grew cooler the higher she climbed, filled with the faint scent of dust, cedar boxes, and something else, something that didn't belong to the house's usual quiet history. Thomas followed just behind her. Callum waited at the bottom with Ilara pressed against his side, the girl's small hand gripping his shirt as though any distance from him might cause the world to tilt. Maeve emerged into the dim attic. Light filtered through a tiny window, scattering across the wooden beams. The dust didn't float freely, not the way it should have. There were faint paths in it, delicate footprints, impossible to ignore. "I see where she walked," Maeve said quietly. She moved carefully, almost respectfully. Thomas scanned the space. This wasn't a frantic search. She knew exactly where she wanted to go. Maeve followed the path of disturbed dust toward the far corner. The wooden floorboards creaked beneath her weight, soft, long, unused sounds. She knelt beside an old trunk, the kind built generations ago, corners reinforced with tarnished brass. The lid was slightly open, like a breath paused mid-inhale. "She touched this," Maeve whispered. Thomas crouched beside her. "Go on." Maeve lifted the lid. Inside lay layers of Grace's past, a stack of Polaroids, a faded quilt her grandmother had sewn, letters tied with string, and a small wooden box carved with delicate roses. Maeve exhaled slowly. "She came from memories." Cretin. Thomas nodded. "But she doesn't understand them." Maeve gently gathered the Polaroids. The edges were soft from years of handling. She spread them across her lap, images, filled with sunlight, laughter, warm afternoons at Ridgeway Lake. One photo showed Grace and Evelyn sitting together on the cabin porch, long before Ilara had been born. Evelyn smiled with an ease Maeve had never seen in her. The two looked inseparable, two young women dreaming of futures they thought would last forever. Thomas sighed. Losing someone like that? It rearranges the world in ways most people never see. Maeve's gaze softened. For Evelyn, losing Grace meant losing the ground beneath her feet. She continued through the trunk and found something unexpected, a notebook filled with Grace's handwriting. Maeve flipped through the pages, pausing at an entry marked by a pressed flower. "Evelyn worries too much. She thinks the world forgets people like her. I keep telling her she's part of our family too." Maeve closed the notebook gently. Her voice trembled. "Grace didn't just love Evelyn. She carried her." Thomas placed a hand on the trunk. "And when Grace died, Evelyn believed she had to carry someone too." "Ilara," Maeve whispered. The realization settled heavily in the attic stillness. Thomas asked softly, "Did you find anything that would make her think she has a right to the child?" Maeve shook her head. "No, nothing like that. Just memories. But memories can be dangerous when mixed with grief. They bend. They twist. They turn into promises never made. Behind them, Callum called up the ladder. Maeve? Thomas? What did she take? Maeve looked around and realized. Nothing was missing, but something was added. A paper lay on top of the trunk, fresh, clean, untouched by dust. Maeve reached for it and lifted it toward the dim light. A child's drawing. A stick-figure family. A tall woman. A little girl. A small house. And written beneath, in a shaky, adult hand, I'm just trying to take care of her like Grace wanted. Maeve closed her eyes. Callum, she said quietly, you need to see this. He climbed up slowly, careful with the ladder. When he reached them, Maeve handed him the drawing. His face paled as he looked at the words. He brought a hand to his forehead, grief and anger and fear all tightening behind his eyes. She's recreating a promise that never existed, Maeve said gently, and she believes it with her whole heart. Callum's voice cracked. Grace would have never asked that. Never. Maeve touched his arm. Grief took Evelyn somewhere dangerous. She's not acting out of hatred. She's acting out of confusion, out of loss. He looked at her, helpless. So what do we do? Maeve glanced around the attic, then back at him. We make sure she knows the truth, and we do it before she convinces herself the lie is real. A small cry rose from the ladder. Elara had climbed up a few steps, her eyes wide. Maeve, is Miss Evelyn mad at me? Maeve knelt and opened her arms. Elara came to her instantly, trembling. No, sweetheart, Maeve whispered. She's not mad. She's hurting. And sometimes people who are hurting forget where they belong. Elara pressed her face into Maeve's shoulder. Callum steadied himself, drawing strength from the sight of his daughter safe in someone's arms. We'll protect her, he murmured. Whatever happens. Oh? Maeve stood, gathering the Polaroids and notebook into a small, neat stack. Callum, she said softly. Evelyn will come back. She won't stop searching until she understands. Thomas looked at both of them. Then we need to be ready. Maeve nodded. We will be, she said. And when she returns, we meet her with truth, not fear. The attic hatch creaked again as Maeve led them back down the ladder one careful step at a time. Because the house was no longer haunted by shadows. It was haunted by love left unfinished. Night settled gently over Ridgeway Lake, wrapping the houses in a stillness that felt deeper than usual. Inside Callum's living room, Maeve sat with Elara asleep against her shoulder, watching the porch light glow through the window. The drawing Evelyn left in the attic lay folded on the table, a reminder that the story wasn't over. Callum paced quietly, checking doors and windows again. She'll come back, he said softly. Maeve nodded, not out of anger, out of confusion. Thomas stood near the hall, alert but calm. Then we need to be ready. A small sound touched the quiet gravel shifting outside. They froze. The porch light flicked on. A woman stood just beyond the glow, arms wrapped around herself, coat blowing lightly in the wind. Evelyn Hartman. Callum and Maeve stepped to the door together. He opened it halfway. Evelyn, he said gently. She lifted her head. Her eyes were wet, unfocused, exhausted. I didn't mean to scare anyone, she whispered. I only came to find what Grace left for me. Maeve stepped forward. Evelyn, you were inside the house. You touched her things. I had to, Evelyn said, voice cracking. Grace promised me, if anything happened, I would take care of Elara. I'm supposed to be her mother. Callum's face tightened with heartbreak. Grace never said that. She did, Evelyn insisted. She told me at the hospital. She asked me to hold the baby. She said, her voice crumbled. The memory was coming undone in her hands. Maeve spoke softly, steadily. Evelyn, you loved Grace. Losing her broke you, and sometimes grief rewrites memories. But taking Elara won't bring Grace back. Evelyn's lips trembled. I just wanted to keep my promise. A small sound behind them made everyone turn. Elara stood in the doorway, sleepy, clutching her stuffed rabbit. Evelyn gasped, Elara? But the child stepped back instinctively, pressing into Maeve for safety. And in that tiny movement, Evelyn broke. She doesn't want me, she whispered. No, Maeve said gently. She already lost one mother. Don't make her lose more. Evelyn's knees softened. Tears spilled quietly. She didn't reach for the girl. She didn't argue. She simply collapsed inward, overwhelmed by a truth she could no longer twist into what she needed. The porch fell silent, except for Evelyn's soft, shaking breaths. Callum knelt beside Evelyn before she collapsed fully onto the porch. He didn't touch her, just stayed near, giving her the space to breathe. "Evelyn," he said quietly, "Grace trusted me to raise our daughter, and Maeve has been the only steady place for her since the day we lost Grace. You're not alone, but you can't take Alara from her home." Evelyn pressed both hands to her face. "I don't know what's real anymore." Maeve stepped closer. "That's why you need help, not blame. Let us call someone who can take care of you properly." Evelyn didn't fight. The weight of her confusion and grief had drained every ounce of resistance. When the sheriff's car rolled up the driveway a few minutes later, she didn't run, didn't argue, just let them guide her gently toward the back seat. Before the door closed, she looked at Maeve. "Tell her I'm sorry." Maeve nodded. "I will." "No." And for the first time that night, Evelyn let herself lean back, surrendering the fight she'd been carrying alone for years. The car pulled away, its taillights fading into the quiet of Ridgeway Lake. Callum exhaled a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Maeve lifted Alara into her arms, the little girl half asleep, thumb tucked under her chin. Inside the house, Callum turned off the porch light and closed the door slowly, almost reverently, as though sealing away a long season of fear. Maeve sat on the couch with Alara curled against her. The child's breathing steadied, warm and gentle. Callum stood nearby, watching them, two people who had unknowingly kept him alive through the darkest winter of his life. "Maeve," he said softly. She looked up. "Thank you. For all of it. For staying when I didn't even know how much I needed someone to stay." She smiled, tired and sincere. "You don't have to thank me. She needed someone." That was enough. Callum sat beside them, careful not to wake Alara. The living room felt different now, lighter, as if the house itself sensed that the storm outside had finally passed. "You know," he said after a quiet moment, "Grace always said the world sends the right person at the right time. I never believed it until you walked through our door." Maeve looked at him for a long, steady moment, not startled, not flustered, just present. "Then let's honor Grace," she said, "and take care of this little girl the way she deserves." He nodded. Alara shifted, opening her eyes just enough to whisper, "Stay. Don't go." Maeve smoothed the child's hair. "I'm right here, sweetheart." Callum felt something settle deep in his chest, a peace he hadn't felt since before Grace died. A sense that, after months of darkness, his home finally had a heartbeat again. Outside, the lake reflected the moonlight in quiet ripples. Inside, three lives once fractured had begun to knit themselves back together. And for the first time in a long time, the house felt like home. In the quiet aftermath of everything they had endured, the little house by Ridgeway Lake felt warmer than it had in years. The fear had passed, leaving behind a kind of stillness that only families who have walked through the storm together can understand. And as Maeve sat with Alara curled safely in her arms, while Callum finally allowed himself to breathe again, it was clear that their lives had been gently stitched back into one whole piece, one that might never have existed without courage, kindness, and a few fragile moments of honesty. It reminded me of those long evenings on an old porch swing, when the day settles down and you finally see what truly matters. You know, stories like this tell us something simple. That love, quiet, patient, and steady, can heal the corners of a home that grief once darkened. That redemption isn't found in grand gestures, but in the way we choose to show up for one another. And that a child's safety, a family's warmth, and the willingness to try again are worth more than any title, fortune, or empty promise. When we reach a certain age, many truths begin to sound familiar. Maybe that's because we've lived enough years to recognize what endures. Like the scent of fresh coffee in a small-town diner, or the way Sunday dinners bring everyone back to the same table, kindness has a way of pulling people together. And just like the porch light that quietly burns through the night, even the smallest act of compassion can guide someone home through their darkest mile. So take a moment, friends, sit back, breathe, and let this story settle with you. Think about the people in your own life who stood by you when things felt uncertain, or the ones who might need a gentle word from you tonight. If this story touched your heart, leave a 1-inch the comments. And if you feel it could be better or want to share your thoughts, just drop a 0. Thank you for listening. May warmth find its way to your doorstep, just as it did for this little family by the lake.